My wife got a court order for our safe deposit box. Sure, I'd hidden my inheritance there. It's all mine, she gloated. I just handed her the key. When she opened it, her own lawyer's hands started to tremble. He slammed it shut and hissed, "Don't touch anything!" My father did not leave me grief. He left me silence, a spreadsheet with one locked cell, and a handwritten note on a half sheet of yellow legal paper that read, in his careful block print, "Unlock if they come for you." I found it folded inside the lining of his briefcase, the same worn brown leather case he had carried every single day of his working life for 31 years. The briefcase smelled like cedar and old coffee, and something I could not name but always associated with him. With safety. With the absolute certainty that someone in the room had already thought 6 moves ahead. I sat in his empty study for 4 hours after finding that note. I did not cry. I just read it over and over until the words stopped looking like words and started looking like instructions. The funeral cost $42,000. I paid it without blinking, without financing, without calling anyone to ask what I should do. My father believed in simplicity, but he also believed in preparation, and those two things are not as contradictory as they sound. Real estate trusts with layered ownership structures, staggered payouts dispersed across a calendar that would take years to fully unwind, holding companies registered under names so generic you would scroll past them in a database without a second glance. Coastal Holdings LLC, Meridian Interest Group, names that sounded like placeholders, like something a 19-year-old creates for a school project. But underneath all of it, if you knew exactly where to look, if you had the right spreadsheet with the right unlocked cells and the right set of keys, there were assets that did not exactly glow under an IRS flashlight. My father never explained the details out loud. He built the walls, reinforced them quietly over decades, and then handed me the blueprints on his way out. What I did with them was my problem now. She did not ask about any of it. Not at first. At the reception after the burial, she stood near the folding table with the cold cuts and the grocery store sheet cake, and she nodded when I told her the lawyers would handle the estate and that it would take some time. She went back to scrolling through her phone. I remember thinking she seemed bored. I wrote it off as grief presenting differently in different people. I wanted to be generous. I was. For a while. Then my cousin Raymond drank too much bourbon at the wake and sat down next to her on the couch and started mumbling. Raymond always talked when he drank, free associating through family history like a man reading from a document nobody asked to see. I heard him say the phrase accounts in Zurich. I watched her eyes stop moving. I watched her go very, very still in the way a cat goes still when something small crosses the yard. A week later, a trust officer from a firm in Bermuda called our house line by mistake. He was looking for my father's estate attorney and dialed 1 digit wrong. The voicemail was 40 seconds long and contained 3 words that told anyone paying attention exactly the kind of conversation the estate involved. She listened to that voicemail twice. I know because I checked the phone log that evening. After that, everything changed. She started searching my office drawers. Poorly at first, in a way that almost made me feel sad for her. Papers flipped the wrong way, pages replaced out of order. My stapler moved 3 inches to the left of where I always keep it. A hanging file folder turned backward in its track. She was not skilled at this yet. She was still in the honeymoon phase of her suspicion, convinced that the evidence would be obvious, that I would be careless, that the money was just sitting somewhere in a folder labeled inheritance, do not steal. It was not. Then she escalated. I came home one Tuesday afternoon and noticed the indicator light on my laptop blinking in a rhythm it had never blinked in before. I pulled up the system log that night after she fell asleep. She had installed a keylogger. She had named the file tax _2022.pdf and buried it 3 folders deep. Subtle. I caught it within 48 hours, but I said absolutely nothing. I uninstalled it cleanly, left no trace of my discovery, and simply watched. Patience is a financial instrument if you know how to use it. When she finally looked me in the eye across the kitchen island and said, "Filing next week, hope you have a good lawyer," she delivered the line with the flat affect of someone who had practiced it in the mirror. She left the message on a yellow sticky note on the refrigerator the following morning, the way someone leaves a note about picking up dry cleaning or replacing the water filter. I read it. I put it back. I made a full pot of coffee, drank a cup standing at the counter, and looked out the kitchen window at the backyard for a long time. Then I called my attorney. The courtroom smelled like stale ambition and floor wax and the particular kind of stress that settles into a room where people argue about money for a living. Her attorney, a man named Garrett, rose from his chair with the confidence of someone who had already mentally deposited his contingency fee. He was wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and he smoothed his jacket lapel with the practiced gesture of a man who wanted everyone to notice it. He asked the judge to compel access to any and all safe deposit boxes, vaults, or storage containers in which I might be concealing marital assets. He used the word vaults with a particular emphasis, drawing it out slightly, the way a prosecutor emphasizes a word they want the jury to remember. My attorney, a quiet man named Delworth who charged more per hour than Garrett did and wore a 12-year-old sport coat on purpose, did not look up from his yellow legal pad. No objection, Your Honor. We are fully prepared to assist in any access the court requires. That was the moment. Right there. If she had been paying attention to the right things, instead of already celebrating, she would have felt the temperature in that room change. You do not agree without hesitation in a discovery dispute unless you have already decided you want them to find exactly what they find. Instead, she leaned toward Garrett and smiled, and that smile was wide and satisfied and just a fraction too loud for the setting. Delworth finally looked up from his pad and glanced at me, and I gave him nothing back. Then I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and removed a single sheet of paper, folded once in thirds. I unfolded it on the table. A bank name, a branch address 2 miles from our house, a vault number, and a brass key on a small red leather tab with the numbers 917 embossed into the leather in clean gold stamping. I slid the whole thing across the table toward the court officer. Garrett stared at it. He picked up the key by the tab and held it away from himself slightly, the way you pick up something you are not quite sure is safe to touch. Her lips curved into a slow, satisfied smile from across the table. That is where he has been hiding it, she said, just loud enough that it was not quite a whisper. Enjoy, I said, the way you would offer someone a mint at the end of dinner, a courtesy, an afterthought. They arrived at the bank on Monday morning at 9:02, 2 minutes after the branch opened, like a team that had spent the weekend visualizing the moment. Her heels struck the marble floor with that particular sharp rhythm that only exists when someone believes they are about to win something. The sound bounced off the high ceilings and the polished stone columns and ricocheted around the lobby, and every single step announced her arrival. Garrett followed 2 paces behind, already composing the invoice in his head at $350 per hour, plus expenses, plus whatever percentage he had negotiated of the recovered assets. He was carrying his briefcase in front of him instead of at his side, and he was smiling the small, tight smile of a man running ahead of the bill. She waved the court order at the desk clerk the way you wave a backstage pass at a bouncer you feel has been insufficiently impressed by you. The clerk read it, looked up, looked back down, and picked up the phone. I was sitting in an upholstered chair near the entrance, a little to the left of the main door, reading a magazine someone had left behind. It was a home and garden publication from 4 months ago. I was on an article about Japanese maple trees. I turned a page. I could feel her looking at me, but I did not look up. When the bank officer came across the lobby and looked in my direction, I set down the magazine, stood up, reached into my jacket pocket, and produced the key. He reached for it. She stepped forward and took it from his hand before he had fully closed his fingers. She held it up for a moment between her thumb and forefinger like a trophy, like evidence, like a punchline she was delivering to an audience only she could see. "It is all mine now," she said, at a volume calibrated precisely to fill the lobby without technically being a shout. She looked at me when she said it. I sat back down and picked up the magazine. I had already read the article about the Japanese maples, but I turned back to it anyway. I already knew what was in that box. The bank officer escorted them through the door at the back of the lobby, and then there was the muffled sound of the vault mechanism, the heavy tumblers rotating through their sequence, and then the precise metallic thunk of the drawer sliding free of its housing. I heard all of it from my chair. The lobby was quiet enough that sound carried, then nothing. Silence for long enough that the teller at the nearest window glanced toward the vault door. Then Garrett's voice. And the thing I will tell you about Garrett's voice is that it changed register completely in the space of about 4 words. He had been operating all morning in the smooth baritone of a man in complete control of the narrative. What came out of the vault door now was something else entirely. Higher, thin at the edges. Do not touch anything. A beat of silence. Then louder, sharper. I said, do not touch anything. People in the lobby turned. 2 tellers stood up. The branch manager, a woman in her 40s with reading glasses pushed up on her head, came around from behind the glass partition and walked briskly toward the vault. She went in. 30 seconds later, she came back out and walked directly to her desk and picked up the phone. She did not look at anyone when she dialed. Her expression was the professional neutral of someone trained to manage crises without broadcasting them, but her jaw was set in a way that told you everything you needed to know about what she had just seen. Garrett came out next. His tie had shifted to the left, and there was a bloom of sweat darkening the collar of his shirt from behind. He was gripping his briefcase against his chest with both arms, not swinging it, not carrying it, holding it against himself the way you hold something when your hands need to do something, or you will fall apart entirely. He stopped in the lobby, looked around, looked at the ceiling, then looked at me. I looked back at him over the top of the magazine. He looked away. Then, she came out. No heels clicking now. She was walking carefully, the way you walk when your legs have decided they are not entirely on your side anymore. The gloat was completely gone. The satisfaction was gone. The smile was gone. She walked past me without eye contact, and I could hear her breathing, and it was shallow and fast, and she stopped just a few feet away and stood with her back to me. "What the hell is this?" she said, to no one in particular. Not loud, not a demand. Something closer to a whisper someone says when the room stops making sense. I will tell you what it was. That safe deposit box contained exactly 4 items. The first was an envelope with a letter inside, written by me, addressed to her by name. The letter explained that the box had been opened pursuant to a court order, that I was aware the court order would be obtained, and that I had prepared accordingly. It was dated 3 weeks before her attorney ever filed the motion. The second item was a subpoena, not a copy of one. An original, certified, court-stamped subpoena directing her attorney Garrett to produce all communications, billing records, and strategic advisement documents related to the divorce proceeding, on the basis that several of his recorded phone calls with her had taken place while she was using a communication platform that routed through a device I owned on our home network during the period in which she had attempted to install monitoring software on my computer. The same week she installed the keylogger, she had spent 11 hours on video calls with Garrett from our home office. I had the logs. Delworth had reviewed them. They were admissible. Garrett's hands were not trembling because of anything shocking. They were trembling because he had just read his own name on a legal document that implied he might become a party to this proceeding rather than just a participant in it. The third item was a single printed page. It was a certified accounting document from a forensic financial firm. It showed in clean, organized columns that the assets my father had left me were structured correctly, documented thoroughly, and registered in my name alone prior to our marriage, in compliance with state law governing separate property inheritance. The holding companies, the trusts, the Bermuda account that the trust officer had called about by accident, all of it. Premarital, documented, protected. Not $1 of it constituted a marital asset under any reading of applicable law. The document had been reviewed and signed by 3 independent certified public accountants and a family law specialist who had never met me before, and therefore had no motivation to shade their conclusions. There was nothing hidden. There was nothing owed. There was nothing to divide. The fourth item was a photograph. It showed her and a man I had never met, sitting at a restaurant table, taken from a distance, on a date I could verify because the restaurant had a chalkboard in the background listing a daily special. The date was 14 months into our marriage. The photograph was not the only one. There were 12 more in a sealed envelope attached to the back of the printed accounting document. I had not placed them there to be cruel. I had placed them there because in our state, Documented infidelity is a factor that courts consider when determining spousal support, and I wanted her attorney to understand the complete landscape of the proceeding before he spent another 6 minutes of billable time on a strategy built entirely on the fiction that I was hiding money. I closed the magazine and set it on the side table next to my chair. I stood up and smoothed the front of my jacket. Garrett was now in a low, urgent conversation with the branch manager, who was shaking her head slowly and pointing toward the phone. He looked like a man rapidly revising the story he had been telling himself all morning. She was still standing a few feet away with her arms folded across her chest, staring at the middle distance. I walked toward the door. I stopped when I was level with her, and I spoke quietly enough that only she could hear me. My father told me once, I said, that the best vault is the one your enemy builds themselves. They design it exactly to fit what they think you are hiding. And then they walk inside and lock the door from the inside and hand you the key on their way in. She did not respond. I did not wait. I walked out through the glass door into the morning light. The air outside was clean and cold and tasted like nothing, which is exactly what freedom tastes like. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Delworth. One word. Perfect. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized with no spousal support awarded, no marital assets transferred, and Garrett facing a separate bar complaint regarding the documented communications. She retained new counsel twice before the proceeding concluded. The brass key, still on its red leather tab with the 917 embossed in gold, is sitting on my desk right now. I keep it because my father would have found that funny. He built walls for 31 years. In the end, one empty box with the right 4 pieces of paper inside it did more work than all of them combined. He always said the best inheritance is not money. It is knowing when to say nothing and what to leave in plain sight.